Welcome to the meeting of the local Chief Superintendent. Don't call it Chief Inspector. Back. We'll start again. Welcome everybody to the meeting of the local police and fire scrutiny panel. Just before we start, I would just like to register our condolences about the sad death of fireman Barry Martin, who died as a result of the fire in Jenners. And Mr. McGarry, I would ask that if you could pass on to your counterpart in Edinburgh the condolences of this committee here, also to his colleagues. Thank you very much. Agenda item number 1, apologies, substitutions.
We have apologies from Councillor Law. Being able to now move to a roll call, can the following members please indicate if they are present at the meeting either in person or remotely? Councillor Brennan.
Present remotely.
Councillor Clockerty.
Present in chamber.
Councillor Crowther.
Present in chamber.
Councillor Daisley.
Present remotely.
Councillor Maguire.
Present remotely.
Provost Mackenzie.
Present in chamber.
Councillor Moran.
Present in chamber.
Councillor Quinn.
Present remotely.
Councillor Reynolds.
Present remotely.
Councillor Wilson.
Present in the chamber.
Are there any declarations of interest?
I now need to read the opening statement. Welcome to this meeting of Inverclyde Council's local police and fire scrutiny panel. This meeting is being held remotely and also in person and will be filmed and recorded for live and subsequent broadcasts available through the council's website. The council is a data controller under the General Data Protection Regulations and the Data Protection Act 2018. We broadcast and record council meetings to fulfil our public task obligation to enable members of the public to observe the democratic process. Data collected during the process will be retained in accordance with council published policies available through the council's website. Members of the council are reminded they should follow the council's established meeting protocols, including around the use of the chat facility, and that comments made in the chat facility are visible to all participants in the meeting, which may include members of the public who've also received invites to the meeting. Thank you, everybody. We move on to performance management. Agenda item number 2, Police Scotland performance report.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. I wonder, Chair, if you could indulge us. Chief Inspector Damien Kane is new as area commander here.
In the temple.
Close that door.
Just close the front door too.
That sounds like your academy.
It's a music festival downstairs. Thank you.
You know that council officer will now report me for all these things. Carry on, Chief Superintendent.
Thank you, Chair. So I was just wondering if you would indulge us to allow Damien Kane, our new Chief Inspector and Area Commander for Inverclyde, to introduce himself first of all, and then we can move into the performance report, if that's okay.
Thank you, Dana. I realise you know me, but some might not. I'm Damien Kane. I'm a recently promoted Chief Inspector. Been in this division 23 years. Some of you might know me from my last job when I was the Community Policing Inspector for a couple of years, about 8 or 9 years ago. I've been around the division for my whole service. I know Inverclyde relatively well. Spent most of my time in Renfrewshire between response policing, community policing, proactive work and drug units. So I'm really delighted to be here. I don't live in Inverclyde, I'm not far away, so I've got a vested interest in looking out for this area. Thank you.
Thank you, Damien. You're very welcome. I know I've had several sessions with you, and I know you're on top of what's happening.
Thank you.
Chief Superintendent.
Thank you for that. So just in terms of our most recent performance report, which is obviously covering the period from the 1st of April up until the 30th of November there, So members will see that the total crime, we've had a reduction up by 7%, and our total number of incidents are also down by 13.6%. What I would say about that in terms of, it's a caveat that I gave the last time, clearly a lot of these figures are relative to the 5-year average, and clearly we had the period of the pandemic during that. So I would give that with that caveat, just to keep that in your mind. But on a positive note, we've had a reduction in sexual crime by 13.6%, disorder by 28.8%, and housebreakings by 16.5%, which are all obviously very impactful on the community. We do have an increase, however, in road traffic casualties, which is up by 29.2%, albeit this is minor in nature, this increase. And our missing people, you will see, is up by 202.5%, both of which are quite significant increases. And I know Lorraine Napier is online, and she's going to give a fuller presentation in terms of the road policing unit and the footprint that they have in Inverclyde and the great work that they do. In terms of the missing people then, you'll see further into the report the kind of breakdown of the kind of ages of people that we tend to deal with. We do tend to deal with vulnerable people. The majority is made up of our top 5 most frequent missing people, and we're working hard with partners in relation to how we can better support these young people. In addition, we've more recently set up a missing persons governance board under our Ops Superintendent Judy Faulkner, and that'll look at what better ways, what learning can we bring in from across the country. There's an approach that's been used elsewhere in the country called the Respect project, and we'll look to see if we can roll that out and further reduce these missing people. So that's probably the main highlights that I would give at the moment. I would like to hand over to Damien, and he'll highlight some of the good work that's taking place and also some of our proactivity, and thereafter more than happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Damien?
Thanks, Davina. If you look at page 1, housebreakings you'll see are down 16.5%. It's often been quoted as one of the most serious, non-violent, non-sexual crimes that people are going to suffer. So the stats are painting a fairly positive picture, but it's still far too many housebreakings have done. Since this report was published, there's been a lot of work between local uniform force resource and a CID-led inquiry, which resulted in one individual being reported arrested for 14 commercial housebreakings that occurred. So they're not included in these figures. There's been further work done since then. Still a lot to be done. I mean, the figures are down substantially, but we're talking about nearly 100 break-ins now. In context, as you'll see further on in the report, the term housebreaking is quite misleading. People tend to think that is genuinely a residential dwelling house. It's not usually the case in most of these. The majority we suffer in Inverclyde are commercial premises, but the financial loss for owners is quite substantial. So we've put a lot of work in prior to this report and ever since. We're still having issues around commercial premises being targeted, and working closely with road policing, Lorraine Napier's team, as well as CID and other force bodies to try and target those that we assess to be responsible. Now, looking further down in the page, acquisitive crime in general is down, but unfortunately we have one rise in terms of theft of shoplifting. Now, my predecessor Paul Cameron reported at the last board that we'd brought in other methods of dealing with that. One was exclusion zones, which have now been used. They were quite new, Paul brought it up before. They're now being used to good effect. So the local authority, police, the Crown are all big in their use, and in effect, as Paul covered before, we have repeat shoplifters, not people who are taking what is a one-off, not for children, adult career criminals who are making a living out of theft. They're the people that this exclusion zone is being used for, and it's basically to bar these people when they're detected for an offence from town centre areas. Port Glasgow, Gallagher Shopping Centre, Greenock Town Centre, for example. We've had 7 people go on. It's still a new process, it's bedding in, but we've had 7 people successfully put into conditions to prevent these crimes taking place. And just in the recent weeks, since this report was produced, 3 are currently on remand. Now, again, just to be clear, I've been asked this before, we're not using this to target people who are maybe stealing to support the cost of living crisis. It's not intended that way at all. We still have the autonomy to make a reasoned decision how we deal with shoplifters, but this is for the hardcore criminals. And the most recent one we had remanded was actually someone that peaked over 100 offences and pending cases for theft. So that's sort of level of offender we're targeting. In addition to that, we put forward a bid a number of months ago for £3,500 after linking in the local authority, decided it would be appropriate to try and support local business owners who are being victims of these crimes, and we've managed to obtain £3,500 to buy 29 radios. They're going to be rolled out between shop owners, town centre cops, community cops who work the town centre, so they've got that real-time contact between them. Already, some of them have been rolled out previously. We're just enhancing that a wee bit and spreading it out further. So the hope is we'll get real-time intelligence back. We'll be able to stop a lot of these thefts before they take place. And likewise, the shopkeepers are able to speak to each other and share their own information to keep each other right. So one of the aspects of the report that might draw attention is further on, there's a reduction in drug detections. Now, to put that in context, there's been no let-up in how K Division are tackling drug supply. The drug detections have dropped somewhat, however, in context, we've raided in the period reported on 62 addresses, and that's been a mixture of local cops from our violence reduction team, divisional cops, uniform, CID. We've even brought in support unit officers from Glasgow who are regularly assisting getting through doors to search for drugs. The supply charges are actually down, but in context, a lot of the search warrants do recover drugs and they do lead to offences being prosecuted, but for a variety of reasons, they're not always of a gravity where you can substantiate a supply offence. So over 100 people have been subject to reports to the fiscal as a result of these searches. So I give you my assurance that's still on the agenda, very much so, and will continue to be. Linked to the drug supply, drug deaths is obviously something that historically is adversely affected Inverclyde as much as anywhere else in Scotland, I would say. So you'll all know about the naloxone rollout. Police piloted that previously, and we have had all community cops, the community policing officers locally have been provided with that tool. Because we're getting good response times from ambulance to the majority of cases that we attend, it's not been used by local officers, but to try and increase the spread, as of this week, there's going to be an enhanced rollout across Ramsgate and Inverclyde. And what's basically going to happen is the response officers, the 999 responders, Constable, Sergeant, Inspector, everyone will be issued with naloxone and be given the training, and that will be rolled out with effect from this week. And that should hopefully increase our input into preventing drug deaths in Inverclyde. Finally, we have a calendar of initiatives planned. We're not just reactive to crime, we're looking to try and get in front of foot. We're going to be targeting different areas of business. We're not always going to publish what we're targeting, obviously, for obvious reasons, throughout the course of the year. Like, for example, that we've just finished an acquisitive crime focus. We've had a number of detections, DNA and fingerprint packages. We've locked up a number of local offenders. We're still targeting the housebreakings, which unfortunately are still an issue. And we're going to roll into February and March. We're going to be focusing more on drugs and violence. We're going to put a renewed focus on that throughout the year. There are other things that will be targeted. We're working closer with the wardens and other partners. Final point from it is the disorder, as you see, is down quite substantially, 58.8%. But again, as the Commander said, that's slightly skewed given the 5-year average. So we're not remiss, we're not thinking we've done a grand job and we've sorted the problem. It's not the case. We're simply trying to keep on top of disorder, but there are having issues around certain areas where youths are gathering. But we're finding the police approach in itself isn't the way to fix that issue. So we're now using with great effect the diversity activities around both Glasgow and other parts of Greenock. The wardens, I have to say, are being absolutely invaluable in the support they're given, so that the wardens have helped target areas for low level offending, and that includes a lot of the youth disorders. So I have to give a lot of credit for disorder dropping, not just to police activity, but to the council diversion, but mainly the wardens. The wardens are the ones that are gathering intelligence for us, allowing us to send out permanent alert letters via the antisocial team, and that itself is having a great impact. So we're basically not trying to criminalise kids that are being kids on weekends, but we are trying to stop them causing disturbance to shop outlets in the community. So I think that'll do it for now, Convener.
Thank you, Damien.
Thank you.
I do agree with you with regard to the wardens. The intel and the hub meetings you have with them on a regular basis, really important to exchange information. One question before I open it up. With regard to the exclusion zone for shoplifters, there was one of your colleagues came along on Tuesday night to the Kilmacombe Community Council, and this came up at the Community Council, and he says, I hope it doesn't mean they're now going to concentrate in Kilmacombe. Is that a fear you have, or will they not travel?
In all honesty, we're targeting a lot of people that tend to go to these areas. The truth is, if you target one area for any crime type, you risk displacement. that we're alert to that, and if it is, we'll evolve and amend the exclusion zones. There's nothing to stop us identifying trends in different areas and reacting to that. So we are alert that it's a possibility. So far, touch wood, it hasn't happened.
Thank you. Councillor Moran.
Thanks, just to touch on a few things that David said, and the missing people, I think that's a kind of good story in a lot of ways, when you say that almost 77% of them are tested within the 24 hours and 95% within 5 days, which is a really good result. The other thing I speak about is domestic abuse. I know that Police Scotland had a proactive approach to this regarding football matches the night before, and they knew the individuals who they could target to make sure that they were safe, the people were safe from home. Do you still have that initiative, David? Do you still proactively target people you think may cause that sort of trouble?
Thanks, Councillor. So absolutely, domestic abuse has been one of Police Scotland's priorities right from the outset, and will continue to be as we move forward. So impactful on families and communities. So you'll know that there's a domestic abuse campaign just ran there at the festive period. That's an annual campaign, but there's real scrutiny around about public protection and domestic abuse, particularly at a daily basis, both at Damien's meeting in the morning and then at my morning meeting at 9 o'clock. I know we have a spotlight today with Lorraine in terms of road policing, but I wonder if moving forward that might be another spotlight that we brought to scrutiny in terms of there's 3 tiers to domestic abuse in terms of being dealt with from a national level for our very, very high tariff offenders. Then our local domestic abuse investigation units, and then our first line responders. So I wonder if that's maybe something that members would be interested in hearing a bit more detail in the future. I'd be more than happy to bring that back. But to give you the reassurance, we discuss domestics every single day, and in terms of that prevention plan and that safeguarding round about people when they take the enormous step to come forward and speak up in terms of what we can put in place, both for the victim but for the wider family network as well.
Thank you. The other thing I was going to sort of make a wee complaint, but I think we're going to have the answer to it quite soon. To say, you go along that road, it's actually madness. You're in the proper lane, you're doing it at proper speed, and they're tailgating you, they're flashing, they're giving you all sorts of signs. It's actually a terrifying experience down in Port Glasgow some days, and I know what they're going to be doing over the next 9 months, so I'll be quiet, I think, but maybe something you can have a look at. The other thing we would say, the shoplifting, this is professional gag, it's not through the economic situation we're in at the moment. And us three is represented for Glasgow, promise to do for self. And they do come along and say it wasn't a place that was targeted, that Gallagher's site, going to change them off at Port Glasgow to and Floyd Road and there. So it's good that that level of intelligence going to it and trying to stop that. And the other thing we're going for a bit is the locks on. I done it trained myself with some of my colleagues, and I have my locksy kit as well. And I keep my first aid kit now, because I load it just part of my first aid kit. There's a lot in the locks on, so I say it's quite a good report. So thank you very much.
Well done, thank you. I'm going to take Councillor Maguire followed by Francesca. Councillor Maguire.
Thank you, convener. I have a couple of comments and then a couple of questions, so please let me. I'll try and ask them all at once. So first of all, it's great to see that the overall violent crime has fallen, because I think that's what I raised last time. It's been a bit of a concern. My first question is around drink driving on page 8. There's been a 38% increase. Is this part of a wider a wider plan where it's been a bit more targeted, or is that part of the skewing that you were talking about with the COVID figures? Is there any particular reason, or have we found that there's been more resource targeted towards that? And my second question was about the counter-terrorism that gets mentioned. I just wondered, are there any measures that we could get feedback for locally for that, like how many people have been, referred to prevent or anything like that? Is there any form of stats that we can get locally for that? And my final question is actually more of an ask. It's just around the reporting of statistics at community councils and tenants and residents association meetings. It's great to have these figures here. However, it would be really helpful to have them ward by ward, kind of as the fire brigade have in their report. So I was just wanting to ask, put forward a motion that we have. Sorry, I got distracted by the message. I want to put forward a motion asking for there to be ward by ward statistics provided to this meeting regularly, and I'd like a paper brought back about the viability of that for the next meeting of this board, if that's possible. I hope that all makes sense.
I think the sound quality wasn't very good this morning.
Apologies, councillor. I'll try my best to answer that. Some of that was lost in translation just because of the connection, but I think we were referencing 3 issues: drink driving, counter-terrorism, prevent referrals, and I think it's community council statistics, is that right?
Yes, that's correct, yes.
Okay, so in terms of drink driving, as the commander said, it's one of these things that we all thought would have been taboo years ago and it stopped happening. Unfortunately, that's now the experience. It's also one of these things you don't know what's going on until you detect it. There's never any undetected reports of drink driving. We rely heavily on the community phoning the police to tell us about drink driving. We've got a really good relationship with the social landlords, the actual landlords and pubs. More than ever before, we're getting civilian information phoning in about suspected drink drivers. That's partly to do with, that's partially down to why we're detecting. A lot of these detections we get are based on phone calls, 999, so we encourage that to be acted on urgently. But secondly, Chief Inspector Lorraine Napier's on the line. Our road policing unit are very proactive in this area, so they beam into our management meetings once a week, but we have daily and sometimes 3 or 4 times a day contact with them, one-to-one contact. And between us, we're very invested in proactively targeting all sorts of vehicle crime, but a particular focus on drink and drug driving. So I think that again points towards the increase in detections for drink driving. I think your second point, councillor, was to do with CT. I couldn't quite hear the full nature of the question. I think you were asking, do we have a method by which we can identify locals that may be at risk of being falling victim to terrorism? Is that what you were asking?
Yes, I was just asking, is there any measures that we can get, because I'm very aware it's also now stat sheet, but is there any measures that we can get given tangibly here for either successful referrals, things like prevent, which I can see one of our officers has said that they can cover, or any other form of measure for that, just because I'm very aware that on that page we don't have anything other than the terrorism threat level.
Okay, I understand. So nationally and across the UK, we do have a number of nominals who are prepared, and sometimes these can be children that come through education, local authority, other times it could be intelligence led. It's not usually a topic we discuss openly. We do have processes in place to identify the early stages when someone may be at risk, and that's something that we've had for a number of years. I would need to take guidance, quite honestly, if that's something we would include in this, that level of detail in this report. But I understand your query, but just if I can hopefully rest assured that we do have people on that full time across the force. We have a local officer embedded in division, and that's his sole focus. He works in K division. He monitors intelligence for a number of different bodies across the UK and further afield.
Martin McNabb can come in to look at events.
Martin,
McNabb, so he's.
Martin, would you like to come in on the prevention?
Yeah, so just to give Councillor Maguire some comfort, we have all the time that Prevent has been enforced, we have had a single Prevent referral in Inverclyde, so it's not been a major issue at all. There are obviously risks with greater immigration to the area that could increase, but as of this date, we have had a single referral.
Okay, just to clarify, it's not anything to do with any immigration or migration into the area. It's more so, I can appreciate the sensitive nature of you don't want to give too much details about things like this. It was just to see if there was any measure that we could get as a panel, and I've typed my motion into the chat.
Thanks, Damien, for your answers. I think just before I bring in Francesca, we have got a special presentation today about road policing. We've raised other aspects that of policing that are not on a day-to-day basis. And I think it would be good, Chief Superintendent, going forward, if we did have short presentations and other aspects of the police force.
Absolutely, and I would be really interested to hear from members what the topics they would like to hear. I know we've spoke previously about cybercrime, you and I.
Yeah.
So, we've spoken today about domestic abuse, but more than happy to be guided on what would be a benefit for scrutiny, and we can compile that list and get a calendar of presentations organised for members.
Thank you, Chief. So I need to hear from members if there's anything specifically you would like to have a presentation on. You can come in.
So, as I understand that, particularly looking at domestic abuse has been offered as a spotlight report from the police, but to be clear, I think what we're saying is that specifics of the Prevent initiative wouldn't be part of what the police would naturally be bringing forward as part of their reporting. Please rest assured we do have officers monitoring Prevent. Martin McNabb is linked to it, and obviously with the police, but it wouldn't be something that we would routinely bring back to this committee for obvious reasons.
No, there's something we don't want to know about. Thank you for that, Ruth. Does this involve me?
It's just Councillor Maguire's motion. She'll put in the chat to show Anne that the.
I think we will take Francesca, please.
Thanks very much, Chair. I definitely welcome that suggestion that's come through there about spotlight reports. That sounds really, really useful. So I'm on page 9 and looking at complaints about police, and the data there looks absolutely fine. It leads me to a question that I'd like to raise about the case of David Carrick. Everyone on the board will know, the panel, that David Carrick was a serial rapist committing horrific crimes and also a serving police officer with the Metropolitan Police, and has sparked a review because it sort of highlighted the fact that approximately 1,000 serving Met officers have been accused of sexual offences and domestic abuse, like we were just discussing. And a number of commentators have said that the Met would be alone in having this particular pernicious problem. I just wanted to ask, and also hopefully, very hopefully, receive some assurances that this may not be an Inverclyde problem or a K Division problem or a Police Scotland problem, but I think it would be really, really good to get a steer from the police present here about what we think we might be looking at in Scotland and specifically Inverclyde. Thanks very much. I'd like to also ask one other question, just that's kind of interlinked. So I noticed on page 5 that community officers delivered an online safety briefing at Port Glasgow Town Hall, and I just was also looking for information about any proactive work that's been carried out among men specifically, and potentially also young women, about problems with cyber harassment, sexual crimes, known as the recent case that's been highlighted with Andrew Tate and some of the really, really difficult attitudes that young people will be seeing. I know that good work's been done with the Mentors and Violence Prevention Programme, but I'd like some information from the police about that. And I'm getting a message saying my connection's poor, so I hope you picked up that message, fingers crossed. Thanks very much, Chair.
We got your 2 questions. I think, Chief Superintendent, you'll probably take the first one. I would imagine a bit of delegation will happen after that to Damien.
Absolutely, you read my mind there, Chair. It's a really valid question, and obviously what we've seen happening across the Metropolitan Police, you will appreciate that across policing across Britain has made us look internally in terms of our processes and our vetting of our officers and staff. But what I would say in terms of reassurance for you, there is nothing been highlighted to me that this is indeed an Inverclyde problem or a K Division problem. If any member of the public has any sort of concerns, however, I would urge them to report them as soon as possible. But our officers and staff work day in, day out. The main purpose is keeping vulnerable people safe. We are absolutely determined to address sexism, misogyny and violence against women, both within our organisation and across society. And you'll know that Deputy Chief Constable Malcolm Graham is leading on that violence against women and girls piece of work. We've already strengthened our vetting measures and introduced an additional check for new recruits just before they're sworn into office as part of that, and we'll commence a rolling programme to review vetting decisions later on this year. We've also invested within our vetting team, like many teams across Police Scotland. We are losing resources through retirements, but this is one area that we know that we require that investment. And if there are any concerns that come out of that, then we will continue to take action as required. To further enhance our ability to safeguard our values and our standards, all our officers and staff will be checked against national systems and not just Scottish systems. And that's in line with the work being taken forward by England and Wales as well, so that we're all talking to each other. It's right that policing is held in high standards and that we have our values, and that as an organisation we expect our workforce to maintain those values. We will always support officers and staff in relation to that, and our standards remain at our heart. Anybody that's not in keeping with our standards and our values will obviously, we won't stand for that within the organisation. And I think it's probably helpful just to highlight, I had a call with Councillor Wilson earlier in the week, and I took the opportunity, we were discussing the Metropolitan Police, and I took the opportunity to go onto our Force intranet at the time. Now we have 4 topics that are on our Force intranet as being the focus for that particular week. And if you can indulge me, I'll just read out what those 4 topics currently are. They've changed actually since you and I caught up. But standards of professional behaviour and discreditable conduct. Why is public confidence important? Driving our values and standards, and it's LGBT History Month now that we've moved into February, so that's the one that has changed. So DCC Taylor is leading on a campaign in terms of us looking internally at our standards and our professionalism, and I think this goes to highlight, this has been ongoing and was launched last year, but this goes to highlight that this remains a focus for us as we move forward, and hopefully that's answered your question.
Thank you. Francesca, does that give you reassurance?
Yeah, it does. It does. Thanks very much for such a full response as well. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Damien, please.
Thanks, Convener. The second part, I believe, is focused on what we do proactively to prevent domestic abuse. So as the Commander touched on, there's 3 levels that we look at. At a local level, we got to the street will attend and report domestic abuse ability.
Sorry, it wasn't about domestic abuse. Sorry to interrupt. I hope you don't mind, Convener. Yeah, have you got that? It was about young people, proactive work with young people, and sort of cyber sexual harassment. Thank you.
Apologies. So cybercrime is one area that's increasing, unfortunately. The more we get access to the internet, the more offending goes online. So there's been a substantial amount of the online safety briefing that was carried out that you referenced. That was in response to that. That was back in September, and there was over 200 youths and families in there. In addition to that, we're arranging with local authority to try and share some police knowledge in terms of upskilling the clad officers. And the view is that we're going to try and spread certain messages like cybercrime, online offendings, always one at the top of the agenda and of interest to education, because it's one that's really hard to police, being quite honest with you, and the best way to deal with it is through prevention. So we're actively seeking to upskill a number of clad officers in addition to our safer communities officers that come out locally and nationally to deliver inputs to the schools. That's one way we're doing it. And there's a lot of online, you probably see a lot of social media sharing. We'll share a lot of safety advice with groups outside with education, out with formal bodies. We work closely with a lot of the care homes locally to try and give safety advice, because we do unfortunately see evidence that youths are groomed online. It's more common just because of the nature of access, the anonymous aspect of the internet. So we'll continue to focus on prevention. Hope that answers your question.
Okay, Francesca?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Ruth, you want to come in with this?
Yes, through you, Convener. There's a motion in the chat which people within the chambers haven't got access to, so I'll read out the motion from Councillor Maguire, which is a report to be brought back to the next panel on getting ward by ward statistics brought to this meeting in regularly in light of the stopping of reporting to community councils and TARAs. At this point in time, I will go and check. that I don't think this motion is competent because one, we have agreed the reporting and the format of the report with the police, and with the convener in this committee approved the reporting format. The other is the overview of the scrutiny panel. It's supposed to be in Inverclyde wide and not on a ward by ward basis. I will, Councillor Maguire, go back and check my understanding on this and get back in touch with you. But at this moment, I don't think that motion would be competent.
Okay, thank you. And I'm happy to have a discussion going forward about how this can be done, possibly, if it's not competent through this panel, how we can make sure that there's statistics to inform our local communities as well. So thank you. Thanks, convener, and thank you, Ruth.
Thanks, Natasha. I know that on Tuesday night, the police officer came along, was manned with statistics from the phone for the past couple of months of December and January with the number of crimes in the village. So the information is available.
Could I come in on that, Convener?
Yeah, sure.
Thanks, Convener. I think just to get your understanding, Councillor, about the statistics. So we're working with the council. We're trying to get an analytical product that's going to be broken down to ward basis because, as Ruth had said, this is more focused on Inverclyde wide. I understand community councils might have a greater interest in their exact area. One thing I'm not keen on is having my beat officers spending time interrogating the system. So what we're trying to do is work smart, try to work with the local authority, identify, overcome the issue with data access, which we're halfway through, and the hope is we're going to have a product very soon that'll be available to each of the community councils. It's going to save time for the cops going through admin. We'll keep them back out in the streets, dealing with issues that are brought up by the community councils. But I'm not a firm officer sitting behind the desk and doing stats, but I do understand that it's of interest to get some statistics. But to reassure you, the officers that do attend the meetings, I do expect my community officers to go to the community council meetings, and my hope is they can then brief in context. I think the context is often far more important than the individual breakdown of stats.
Yeah, I know the visit is very worthwhile, but their priority is to lift people, isn't it? Damien?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Wonderful convenient there. I don't see anything else in the chat. Oh, Lynn Quinn, sorry. You have a question?
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Apologies, I had lost connection, so apologies if I repeat something that's been said before. It was just when I'd come back in, I had noticed the discussion was around spotlight sessions here, which yeah, would be really useful for myself. So I've got a bit of a request to see if we could do a spotlight on our community policing teams, because I realise that the stats that we get here are pretty much reactive stats. It's about crimes that have already happened, but obviously, as you'll all appreciate, the community policing and what they do is all about prevention and being proactive. So it'd be really good to hear some of the initiatives that they're doing as a community police team, because we really see the benefits of our community policing teams out in our community. So it's really good to maybe put a spotlight on them and all the great work that they're doing. Thanks.
Thank you, Lynn. Chief Superintendent.
Thanks, Councillor. Absolutely. What I would ask is we maybe leave that one to later in the year. We're in the process just now of reviewing our community policing model, and we're just concluding a consultation process. So if you just give us a bit of time in that, then that would probably be more productive in terms of this meeting and the information that we'll be able to give you. We want it obviously to work as best we can. I'm speaking with the Chief Exec, Louise Long, as well, in terms of community wardens and how we could all better work together. So I'm hoping that would be a much more productive input if we could give that a bit of time and do it later in the year, if that's okay.
Thank you. Yes. Okay, Lynn? Yep,
Great, that's great, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Crowther, sorry, you've been waiting a while.
That's nice, thank you, Convener. This is one of the reports that I do like to read, where the vast majority of the number of crimes is actually reducing and the detection rate is increasing. Like Councillor Moran, I'd just like to focus on the missing persons, and it is good to see that the vast majority, 77%, are traced within the 24 hours, with 95% within 4 days. However, that still leaves 5%, And based on the figure of 121, it looks as if there's a total of 6 persons actually missing greater than the 4 days, which equates roughly to 1 per month. Is there any critical timescale whereby persons may be considered to be in danger or at risk, and that is then escalated from local to national?
Thanks, Councillor. So every missing person report, each of the 121 referenced, they'll all be treated as independent investigations. So initially what happens is, as soon as the information goes through to 999, it's given a risk assessment based on the basic facts that are taken before. Depending on what the circumstances are, it could be someone who's elderly, who's wandered off, could be a small child. Every factor will be taken into consideration. There'll be an immediate risk assessment, and that will be escalated locally to division. At a local level, every missing person is dealt with by constables overseen by a sergeant, and for medium and higher risk ones, which are ones that require a greater number of external resources brought in, partner support, they will be overseen by an inspector and above. So in context, you're absolutely right with the figures. There is a significant increase. As the report covers, the top 5 involved in that have been missing 38 to 40 times, roughly speaking. So they make up, the top 5 make up for the same number we had in the whole year in the last reporting period. But this is because when we get reports, we treat them all seriously. We've changed slightly over the last year and a half of how we are recording. So previously, there would have been phone calls to the police about use. We've absconded, truanted, maybe left care homes. And we put in a proportionate response, we risk assess it, send the police. We wouldn't always raise a missing person report. It was just we would deal with the facts in front of us. We quite often get the youth back very quickly, within a matter of minutes or hours. We wouldn't record them as a missing person, we dealt with it as a concern. But so we get a better understanding of where these patterns of behaviour are, so we can target youths in particular. Most of these individuals, all the top 5 are under 18, so we can get a picture of where we need to arrange support. So we're now much better at recording every time someone goes missing. And that also helps from a stats point of view. So if I'm an investigator looking for someone who's been missing before, I'm going to have a lot more data available to me. That's why we're really quite good at finding most of the missing people very quickly. But as you point out, there will be a period when an investigation is termed a long-term inquiry. After a number of days, we will always have a CAD review, a minimum of 3 days. We've had an inquiry on the go just now where we did a CAD review on day 1. That's just because we're topping and tailing, we're making sure there's nothing missed. We'll then update UK-wide after 28 days, and the National Crime Agency were notified. So we have this massive pool of resource. Most missing persons are dealt with by local cops, but any that are high risk, it doesn't necessarily matter how long they're missing for. If we think they're really high risk, within 5 to 10 minutes we can escalate this to national resources and bring them in to help.
When you talk about high risk, do you also include people with elderly people with dementia? Would they be classified in your high risk category?
Yeah, so when we take a missing person report, we have an aid memoir. It's just a number of basic points to consider: physical ailments, mental ailments, history of depression. What did they say when we're going missing? Is it someone who goes missing most days, a truant from school and turns up safe and well? Is it someone who's got a lot of issues and would be at risk immediately? Conversely, is it someone who might be a risk to the public? Any of these categories where there's a grave and immediate risk, for any reason at all, it's a subjective assessment by trained cops. We will grade them as high risk and we'll put in the appropriate level of resource.
Yeah, that's fine, that's all. Thank you.
Chief Superintendent.
Thanks, Chair. Just to come in on that, so there's a protocol called the Herbert Protocol, just and that deals
Which
with
protocol?
Herbert
Protocol. I knew Herbert once.
It specifically deals with people with Alzheimer's and dementia. And the idea behind it is that the family give us a bit of background about the individual. So if they do wander off, we're not wasting time, because as Damien has highlighted, these are very high risk individuals for us, you know, who could walk out without shoes on, without suitable jackets on in very cold weather, and they are time critical to us. So rather than us having to get the full story from our family right from the outset, we actually have engaged with the family prior to that. We've already got that on record, and all we're asking from the family is there anything else we need to be updated on in terms of their history? Have they deteriorated in terms of their condition, etc.? So I would say that's a real positive in terms of us moving forward. We also have a national division who collate all our long-term missing people. You know, some people don't want to be found as a reality, so some of these cases are actually UK-wide. because they've actually decided to leave the area and they don't want to be found. So it's not just a Police Scotland inquiry, it will go national as required as well, and we'll bring in partners. We'll use the Coast Guard, for example, as required. Obviously that's prevalent here in Inverclyde, given the close proximity to water. So, we'll bring in partners as required to search for missing people. But as Damon's highlighted, that they're graded. Every missing person is discussed at my morning meeting at 9 o'clock every day. The one that Damon's referred to, we are getting regular updates both in the morning, at lunchtime and at the close of play every day to assure myself that we are doing everything we can to find this individual.
That's lovely, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, John?
Yes,
Thank you, Chief.
more than happy with that.
Natasha, have you come back in with a question?
Yes, Chair, it wasn't a question, it was just to say thank you to the Superintendent. I realised that I hadn't, the Chief Inspector, I hadn't said thank you, so thank you for your responses and for filling me in on that. I'm looking forward to hearing more about the system in the future. So thank you.
Thank you. Now, I don't see anything else on the chat. Thank you very much to both of you. We now move on to Acting Chief Inspector Lorraine Napier, who is going to give us a presentation on Police Scotland road policing. And we've got a nice picture of Port Glasgow and a police car on our screen.
Yeah,
That's the same picture that I've got.
That's Councillor Clopton myself at the back.
Lorraine, the floor is yours.
Just make sure she's still on.
She looks as if it's still on, and she also looks as if she's off mute as well.
She'll be there.
She's confirmed she's online earlier. I wonder if she can hear us the sound.
Lorraine, I'm unsure if you can hear us in the chamber, but we're not hearing any sound through in the chamber. I don't know if those online are hearing any sound.
I can certainly hear you. Can you not hear me?
No, we
You know.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Apologies for the technical issues, and thank you very much. I am Temporary Chief Inspector Lorraine Napier, and I am the West Area Commander for Roads Policing. Thank you very much for inviting me along today to highlight the work that road policing do in your community. And if we can have the next points of the slide, please. Road policing in the West have 12 bases across the west of Scotland. They have got 1 Chief Inspector, 6 inspectors, 27 sergeants and 200 police constables. Greater Glasgow, Renfrewshire and Inverclyde operate from the Operational Support Division in Glasgow, just off junction 24 of the M8, and this affords us easy access to both K and G divisions. We are also supported in the West by the West contingent of our National Motorcycle Unit, which comprises of 1 inspector, 2 sergeants and 22 police constables. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the Road Safety Framework for 2030. The framework is set out by Transport Scotland in conjunction with key partners who attend the local partnership forums. ROSPA, SCORSA, Scottish Fire and Rescue, Scottish Ambulance Service and Road Safety Scotland, to name a few. And this framework sets out 5 strategic outcomes which describe the road safety environment that we aim to deliver. These outcomes align to the 5 pillars of the SAFE system, which is safe road use, safe vehicles, safe speeds, safe roads and roadsides, and post-crash response. The long-term goal for road safety is where no one dies or is seriously injured on our roads by 2050. And the 2030 interim targets are to reduce the number of people killed by 50%, the number of people seriously injured by 50%, the number of children under the age of 16 killed under 60%, and to reduce the number of children under 16 seriously injured by 60%. Next slide, please. So how do road policing contribute to local policing and keeping people safe? We attend and inquire into all fatal and serious likely to prove road collisions. Sorry, this just points down, and if you just point down everyone, I'll just cover them. Sorry, they're individual. So we attend and inquire into all fatal, serious, likely to prove road collisions using our specialist trained officers, and this includes our collision investigators, our senior investigating officers, our family liaison officers, and this is to ensure that we provide a robust inquiry on behalf of the Crown, ensuring that anyone's responsible is brought to justice. We conduct high visibility patrols using marked and unmarked cars to look at our Fatal 5, which we'll cover in the next slide. And we, as I say, we focus on our Fatal 5. We work with division to disrupt and deter criminal use of the road network. The Chief Inspector Kane touched on that earlier, and we often use our specialist pursuit techniques and tactics to bring any vehicle pursuits to a safe conclusion. We work in partnership with key partners such as DVSA, HMRC, DVLA to detect illegal and unsafe use of vehicles on our roads, and we deliver educational inputs such as Operation Close Pass, the new driver early intervention scheme, and soon to roll out the rider refinement in the West, which I'll touch on later. We work in partnership with the Safety Camera Unit to identify potential site selection locations, in addition to short and flexible deployments in response to any emerging trends of speeding. Currently, we have got 5 vans in the West, and we've actually got 3 mobile sites now and 6 sites across the Inverclyde area. Further work will be highlighted in this area later on in the presentation. We also work in partnership with our local authorities via our traffic management dedicated officers who work with the local authority, and the traffic management officer covering Inverclyde actually attends the Inverclyde Road Safety Working Group. Our National Motorcycle Unit assists with large-scale events and in particular address any traffic management issues in addition to escorting VIP visits. The National Motorcycle Unit also assists with high visibility patrols as above the road policing do, and we'll be introducing 2 unmarked motorbikes into our fleet in spring of this year to target unsafe riding by motorcyclists. We direct our activities in line with our national calendar of road safety activity. In the forthcoming month in March, we are looking into our mobile phone week, our vulnerable road user week, and our speed campaign as well. So as previously mentioned, the Fatal 5, these are widely regarded and recognised as the main contributory and causation factors in all serious and fatal RTCs. And road policing dedicate the majority of our patrol time to targeting these. And these are drink and drug driving, careless driving, speed, mobile phone use, and seatbelt use. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the Safety Camera Unit, I've already mentioned them. Their aim is to reduce casualties where speeding is a contributory factor. Within Inverclyde, we have actually got 9 locations. There's actually 6 fixed sites and 3 mobile sites. And since January 2022 to the end of December 2022, there was actually 11,360 enforcement hours, detecting 436 offences, and all the locations are listed on the slide there. There haven't been any new sites identified during the site selection of this year, so there will be no forthcoming speeding surveys pending in Inverclyde. Next slide, please. So looking at the RTC statistics in Inverclyde from April to December 2022, as a whole, Renfrewshire and Inverclyde have saw 4 fatals, and that was comparable to last year. Looking specifically at Inverclyde, there has been 1 fatal collision, and that's comparable to last year as well, and this actually occurred in Q3. Looking at serious injury, there's been 18 people seriously injured in Inverclyde, which is a 5 increase on last year, but serious injury can be anything from a cut to a broken finger right up to serious and likely to prove collisions. And when we look at slight injury, there's been 22 people slightly injured in comparison to 21 last year, so a 5% increase. Next slide, please. So when we look at our current fatal statistics for Inverclyde, as I previously mentioned, there's been one, which was in Q3, and this was actually the driver of vehicle 2, which would mean that there's possibly somebody that may be accountable for that collision. Out of the 4 for Renfrewshire and Inverclyde, 3 have been car drivers and 1 have been pedestrian. When we look at the figures for last year, the only fatality in Inverclyde was in Q2, and it was a motorcycle rider who sadly lost their life. Next slide, please. So, road safety operations and initiative. Across Scotland, road policing deliver upon many operations and initiatives to help us to improve road safety. And just to select a few out of the list that's highlighted there, Operation Close Pass, it's delivered in conjunction with our local policing colleagues to tackle drivers passing too close to cyclists. This is where we deploy plainclothes officers on pedal cyclists with bike-mounted cameras. The driver stands on a specially designed mat that shows their close proximity that they have passed that bike on, and we reinforce this by either education or enforcement to rectify this manner of driving. Rider Refinement North, this is being rolled out across the country this year, and this is a process of being rolled out this year, and it's a programme actually to educate motorcyclists on safe riding. Kieran's Legacy is a charity which has provided 33 defibrillators to road policing resources in the West, and we actively put these into our road policing vehicles and are called upon in times of need, and to have been used in the West so far this year. Specific to Inverclyde, we've done Operation Close Pass in Gourock, and we have detected several offences during that time. We've supported local policing with use of off-road bikes, quads, and Speedston Road in Johnston. In the A726 to the Red Smiddy roundabout in the A8, we've addressed speed and noise concerns using high visibility patrols and going towards engagement and enforcement of any drivers that was detected. We've targeted vehicles on the A8 for inappropriate driving, using both marked and unmarked vehicles, and again used enforcement and education. We conduct road checks on the A8 East Hamilton Street in conjunction with DBSA for unsafe use of vehicles, and Operation Tramline on the A78 Port Glasgow to Largs Road, in addition to the A8, which is the use of our unmarked tractor unit or personnel carrier to detect mobile phones and seatbelt usage or fail to wear seatbelt usage. We do numerous speed checks with our local policing colleagues, and also our National Motorcycle Unit not only supports our road policing and local policing colleagues, but they also attend local parades for traffic management purposes. Next slide, please. So it very much is black hats before white hats. We contribute towards local policing priorities to improve the safety and well-being of the people, places and communities across Scotland. And that concludes my presentation, and I'm more than happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lorraine. That was most informative. Colleagues, do we have any questions for Lorraine? I've got one myself, just a clarification. What is Virion and toll rate?
These are two operations that we work with local policing to address the house break-ins that Chief Inspector Kane mentioned, and the other one is for OCGs to disrupt and deter the criminal use of the road by serious and organised crime groups.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. There's one small question there. It may just be kind of clarification more than anything, and it was the fatal 5, where you'd mentioned one of the categories there was careless driving. Would that also include dangerous driving?
Yes, very much so. It's dangerous driving and careless driving. It's an inappropriate use of the road, to be fair. So absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Good point. Some people get careless with their taxis, don't they? Sorry.
Francesca.
Oh, Francesca.
Thanks very much, convener, and thanks, Ruth. Careless with taxes and seatbelts, I'm afraid. So yeah, I just wanted to ask a question about, so kind of linked to the priorities you mentioned about safe road use and young people's safety. And I'm just thinking, we go as elected members to lots of parent partnership meetings, and a regular question that's always asked is about roads round schools at pick up and drop off times, and we know that there's a kind of double challenge if people want to park close to schools, and then but we also want children and young people to get involved in active travel, but it can end up getting quite risky around schools at those times. And I was just thinking, in an ideal world, what would the advice be to school leaders and to parents about making the roads around schools as safe as possible for our young people?
Lorraine, I think it's something people have been pondering for decades.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about the safe use of the shared road space, and to adhere to the markings outside the school, not to park where visibility would make children less visible to road users, to obviously comply with the 20s outside schools, and to try and not park, as I say, within these zones. It's all about the safe shared use of that space, to allow the road safety to obviously take preference.
Thank you, Lorraine. I don't see any more questions.
Thank you, very quiet. No, it's just somebody else wanted to talk. No.
It's a Brennan with a hand.
Testing?
Don't know if it's a legacy hand.
Well, I think that's no, it's just, I really do appreciate the presentation. There was a feeling, obviously as whole campaigners that, when you did lose the policing unit along the road there at Rimmel Street, that we never had one. But this is obviously proving that it's not the case. And I really do appreciate this, and I just wondered if, we maybe do a bit of publicity on it, let the wider public know that there is a good pushing out there. You've had a wee advertising campaign, just a wee story in the local press, just let people know it. Well, I've got a good push, and it's active.
I'm happy to take that forward, Lorraine, if you like to pick that up off table. We can push that out via Kate Division social media.
Yes, ma'am. I'm struggling to hear, but we do use the social media very, very often. But yeah, absolutely, happy to pick that up.
Perfect, thank you.
And Lorraine, I would have a word with George Barber, our media person as well.
Aye.
To express the support of this committee for road policing.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you very much, Lorraine. You can stand down now. And Chief Superintendent, Chief Inspector, thank you as well. You can leave if you want to. I know you're busy people.
Take that
thank you very much for coming along. I do appreciate it. We move on to agenda item number 4, Scottish Fire and Rescue Service Performance Report. Mr. McGarry. David.
Good afternoon, Chair. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, can everybody hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Can hear you.
Yeah. Perfect, thanks very much. Chair, apologies for not being in the chamber. I'm actually on leave this week, and I'll introduce Paul in a second. Paul's just started with us, so I didn't think it was fair for Paul to come along. I'll let him get his feet under the table within the area. So I'll just start by saying thanks for the words of support from the committee. It's been a tough week for everyone in the service, just not in Scotland, but across the whole of the UK and beyond. So my thoughts and prayers have been and continue to be with Barry Martin's family. I want to introduce Paul Story, who's taken over on a temporary basis within Inverclyde. Paul brings a huge wealth of experience, and I'm absolutely delighted to have him as part of the team. But I say I didn't think it was fair with Paul just starting from to produce and talk through the report, but he will do in the future. So the production of this. Thanks, Chair. So the production of this particular report and the timing of the submission meant that some of the figures were provisional, but regardless, it does give us an indication of quite a few positive downwards trends, and I'll touch on them as I go through the report, but it is pleasing to see. This reporting period also covers the bonfire period, and I want to thank all partners, not least Police Scotland, for another year seeing an effective delivery of Operation Moonbeam. Operational demand across that period was very low, and that's down in no small part to the planning with the local authority, the preventative activities and the partnership working throughout that period. So a really positive piece of work. Chair, one action from the last committee that was asked was around water safety, more specifically about ice and frozen water. So I can confirm that the Community Action Team carried out visits to Inverclyde schools and engaged directly with 960 pupils regarding this issue. Once again, 0 water-related incidents, which is great. I know the committee will welcome it, in particular Councillor Crowther will welcome as well. So I'll go through the report now. I don't intend to go through it line by line. Accidental dwelling fires were up very slightly by 1. During this period, our operational crews and Community Action Team carried out 71 what we call post-domestic incident response. So when there is any incident within the local community, they'll go and speak to neighbours, offer a home fire safety visit service to them. So 160 home fire safety visits were carried out, 56 which were high risk, that's using the risk matrix that we use, and 50 homes within Inverclyde received new smoke detectors during the period. On accidental dwelling fires, although there's a very slight increase of 1, it's important to note that over half of the incidents we attended had no firefighting action required at all. So it really just embeds the importance of that early warning of fire, and it's also borne out in the statistics you see within the next section, which is casualties. So we've also been doing some work with Riverclyde Housing Association around staff recognising fire risk and making that referral to us to provide that service to residents across Inverclyde, and that will continue not just with them but any organisations within the area that can assist us in that referral pathway. Accidental dwelling fire casualties, pleasing to see just 1 here, and it's 1 too many, but it was slight injuries. Local engagement in the community is positive and well within that 24-hour period for home fire safety visits or any adults at risk of harm. If we do get partner referrals in, whilst the visit might not be carried out that day, action will be acted upon on that same day. So unintentional injury and harm, pleasing to see a reduction in both the year-on-year and 3-yearly figures. So we'll continue to work alongside partners to reduce these figures further, and that's everything that we talked about, from traffic collisions to unintentional injury and harm in the home environment. Operational crews and the Community Action Team carried out 6 additional adult protection referrals during this particular period. There was a water safety action group meeting, things like I talked about the water and ice safety presentation to young people, and also a joint visit after a referral with our social work colleagues after concerns from crews when they came across somebody that they had concerns for. So it's important that we see that two-way street, not just from partners referring to us in terms of safety from fire. It's important that our crews are their eyes and ears as well, that if they've got concern that might not necessarily be related to fire, but there can be additional support put in from a partner agency. That is a two-way street, and we'll encourage that to continue where we can. Deliberate fire setting a 5-year low, which is excellent, and that ties in with what I said about the bonfire period. That partnership hub, those Monday, Wednesday, Friday meetings remains our single route for information sharing about trends or activity. So it's really pleasing to see that it's lowest for 5 years, and that includes things like an individual young person being nominated, being identified as having an issue with fire raising, and that led to intervention with that individual at school to talk that through with them. Non-domestic fires, an increase here, but it's set against a total of 1. Any relevant premises, so that's the premises that fall under the Fire Scotland Act, prevention teams or protection teams will go out and carry out what's called a post-fire audit. So that's to support the business, to see where the risk assessment failure happened, and just provide a bit of assistance and feedback on that. Youth fires reasonably consistent against last year's figures, and you can see some of the premises that are there, who are the sort of top reporters, if you like, with being schools. So that will form part of that discussion moving forward with engagement with young people, is to look at the causes of these actuations and how we can prevent that in the future, because it's really important whether you see a school as a business or not. It's important that we're keeping young people in the class. It's important that businesses are not having their day disrupted with unwanted firearm signals. So we'll continue to do as much as we can with the initial crews that go out, and then as part of that developed process, if need be, the protection officers would go out and provide that additional level of support to see what the causes of these alarms are. Chair, I know that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but I'm more than happy to take any questions that the committee may have.
No, thank you. That was very good, David, because we do get the papers beforehand that gives us an opportunity to go through and read them. So it helps if it's just a short summary. Any questions? Councillor Moran?
Thank you, David, for the paper. David, I'm going to ask you another question. A couple of weeks here, we had a real heavy downpour and the whole place was flooded. And right in front of your fire station, you think the client had come up to the very tops of it. But you were fortunate enough to know that there's a back entrance to the fire station. Were you in any way affected operationally during that period? Because as somebody, I tried to get Port Glasgow myself that day, and it was almost impossible. But I just remember the water being so far up, almost touching right into you where your station was. So just, you know, and I see they're working on it now, so just a bit of reassurance that it never affected operational that day, and they're always going to have it fixed for the future, so it will not happen anytime soon in the future.
Good question. David?
It's an excellent question, Councillor, and we have had reason every year. What we will do is carry out a exercise with regards to business continuity. You know, should something affect our site, or if it was a flu pandemic and staff being unable to attend work, and that's carried out by our civil contingencies officers in conjunction with the area management team. Thankfully, on this occasion, the flooding you talked about didn't affect us operationally. What we do in the background when something like this, so spate conditions appear, because you've got flooding in Inverclyde, but what we see is that across wherever that weather warning is. So our operations control room at Johnston will set up what's called an instant support room. So colleagues like Paul, myself, and other officers will go in and start that coordination piece. So whilst you will have operational crews dealing with individual incidents, what you have at our control room is an instant support room that looks at that resourcing picture right across Scotland and across the West. When we talked about spotlights there, and I know some members of the committee that have been on the committee previously, what I could suggest in the future, and I'll get one of the local area officers to do it, Chair, if you think it's appropriate, is I could organise a visit to Johnston, to the operations control room, and you can see firsthand, committee members, how that coordination happens, because I think it'll be important. It would give you certainly a lot of reassurance about the arrangements that we have in place when these spate conditions happen.
I'm noticing nodding heads, David. Thanks for that. Any other questions? Oh, Councillor Crowther.
Thank you, Convener. It's not a question, rather, it's a comment, David, and it's really to appreciate the time and effort that yourself and your team did going round the schools, explaining the dangers of going on to frozen ponds. Sadly, as we could see that there was events in Birmingham whereby we saw the tragic loss of life of young persons. So on that basis, I would like to thank you for the work you did going round the school locally. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. It's COVID was a challenge for everybody. It was a challenge for society, but it was a challenge for the emergency services. But I think probably one of the frustrations from a personal perspective is that our real value is face-to-face communication. Our real value, particularly around young people, is being in the room with them and talking to them. So it's really pleasing to come out the other end of that and see that the community action team, and it is a very, I have to say, quite a limited team. We get a big bang for our buck from them, but they are really good at that youth engagement and going out and talking to them about a number of topics, not just fire-related activity, and we've touched on water safety as well. So every time we're monitoring these, Councillor, it's really pleasing to see that for quite a period of time now we've had no water related incidents, and I hope that continues in the future. But thanks very much.
Yeah, it was encouraging. Francesca, I see your hand.
Thanks very much, Convener, and thanks very much, David. And just really raising this, pardon the pun, you did mention the bonfire period. as you'll know, there's, you know, unprecedented cuts to local government funding, and one of the things that we're having to at council consider potentially looking at cutting is our central gathering that we have at the Battery Park with fireworks. I'm just wondering, with your expert opinion and your expertise, do you think that the removal of a big community focal point at that time of year could have an impact and potential increase on sort of rogue ad hoc fires in local communities? Thanks.
David, there's
Yeah.
a good question.
That certainly is. Good questions today. I think it'd be tough to speculate on that. I think, given that Fire and Rescue's advice, not just around the safe use of fireworks and directing people towards those larger organised displays, there is always that potential for those displays to move out into sort of smaller self-organised ones. I know that a lot of the supermarkets have stopped selling fireworks, and that's maybe the work that we can do along with Trade and Standard colleagues to look at the sale of fireworks in general. But it just shows you how the pressure on budgetary spends can impact on safety. But yeah, there is that potential if there wasn't an organised display there that somebody would want to start their own.
Thank you, David. That was a good answer. Any other questions, colleagues? I don't see any hands up. I see nothing in the chat. David, thank you very much for your presentation, and we look forward to seeing your colleague, hearing from your colleague at the next meeting. Thank you. We move on to new business, agenda item number 5, Local Police and Fire Scrutiny Panel Update Report. Ross Scullion. Ross, you've waited patiently all through, but you're on now. I think you're muted, Ross.
Yes. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Aye, you know.
Oh, yeah. So, thanks, convener. Yeah, so this is a report that informs members of the local and national initiatives, reviews, consultations that are relevant to Police Scotland and Scottish Fire and Rescue Services. So I'll run through some of the updates. The first one relates to the Scottish Police Authority board meeting that was held on the 24th of November. And they considered a number of updates in relation to the ongoing work of the authority. This included the evidence that was given to Scottish Parliament's Criminal Justice Committee as part of their pre-budget scrutiny, which reiterated the impact on policing of the proposed at that time flat cash budget approach. We also had the information on partner discussions on how we can work together to reduce the number of children held in police custody, as it is viewed generally as not being an appropriate place for children. We had an update on regional engagement meetings with scrutiny conveners that went on around the country. There was a conference on the impact of mental health demand on policing, and there was also a drug driving update which showed an improving picture in terms of the number of time barred cases. So that's quite relevant to the question that was asked by Councillor Maguire earlier about the increases in the offences around driving under influence and the impact that the drug driving improved methods have had on that. The next point is around the Criminal Justice Committee. So they met on the 14th of December, and the committee took evidence on the Bail and Release from Custody Scotland bill at stage 1. So this is a bill that makes changes to the law in 2 main areas. Decisions about granting bail to people accused of a crime, and arrangements for the release of some prisoners and the support that's provided to them on leaving prison. On to a couple of consultation updates. So Scottish Police Authority have conducted a very initial review exercise to inform their proposed outcomes and activities for their next strategic period. At this point, it's very much an open-ended response to test their initial conclusions. They're not consulting in a structured way at the moment, so at this point, council officers have just prepared a very brief response to them based on those initial findings, and that was in by the January deadline. Locally, our local policing plan is being prepared in draft form, and they are looking for our local authority comments on the plan. So I've met with yourself, convener, to discuss our response to that, and we are planning to submit that to the next meeting of this committee. In terms of, in relation to also local police plans, Scottish Police Authority and COSLA in January published a framework for assisting elected members in scrutiny of local police planning. So that's scrutinising at the different stages, the preparation, the life of the plan and the review of the plan. And we intend to bring that as a report to the next committee meeting as well, the next panel meeting as well. On to Scottish Fire and Rescue Service Board. They met on the 15th of December to discuss general business. One notable item from that agenda was that Scottish Fire and Rescue have prepared a draft corporate parenting plan for 23-26, which was due to be published in January, and that's under their obligations under the Part 9 of the Children and Young People Scotland Act 2014. From between the last meeting and this, the Scottish Fire and Rescue have published their 21-22 incident statistics. In terms of very headline figures, Inverclyde did remain the local authority with the highest rate for total fires per 100,000 population. And within that total fires figure, the secondary fires, we were also the highest per 100,000 population. More encouragingly, the rate of primary fires per 100,000 population did decrease, and we moved down the ranks in local authorities from 5th to 7th. On to the Fire Brigade Union strike ballot. So the firefighters and control staff were being balloted on potential strike action. The ballot opened 5th of December and closed on the 30th of January. And we now know that the result was that there was a vote to strike, with over 8% of those that voted and voting in favour. The final point of the report was on the Scottish budget. So the Scottish Government statement on the budget stated there would be an additional 80 million in resource funding for Police Scotland, which represents a 6.3% increase. Scottish Fire and Rescue are to receive a 10 million increase to support their service delivery. In terms of responses, the Chief Constable of Police Scotland and the Chairman of the Scottish Police Authority both responded with statements recognising that this was an improvement on the proposed flat cash budget approach, but again pointing out that significant challenges remained in delivering what is required in terms of the budget that has been given to them. And thank you for that, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much. That was very, very comprehensive. Colleagues, do we have any questions? No, I don't see any.
Maybe just a comment.
Yes, please.
Maybe just a comment. You know, the Chief Constable said that, you know, there will be choices have to be made going forward, but today we're getting the budget figures from the Scottish Government, so hopefully going forward we find it with integral increase more fire and rescue and our police budgets, and it's not all smoke and mirrors and best as a cut. So hopefully speaking some good news today for the budget.
Oh, well, we hope so.
Hope so.
Yeah, Brad. I don't necessarily share your confidence.
I'll try to.
But we'll see. Councillor Quinn, please.
Yeah, so I've probably got a point to make. I mean, it's just unfortunate that the Chief Inspector's gone. It's just obviously under 3.5, the mental health and policing, it's been mentioned that it's having a huge demand on policing. So it was just to kind of unpick that from a local point of view. Obviously, I'll not get that question answered from you, Ross. Thankfully, I'm not asking. But maybe that's something, if we are doing a spotlight, the impact of mental health within policing locally might be a subject that we want to unpick, since it's been highlighted at board level as being a significant issue.
Paul, you want to answer that?
Can
I think it was.
You can, yeah.
There is some work being done both locally and nationally, looking at mental health and the impact on policing. Certainly the Scottish Government have got a board looking at mental health, and the police are part of that, are looking at not only emergency responses but longer term responses. Also, we're looking in Inverclyde at trauma-informed practice, and we have the first meeting of the board to take that forward in coming weeks. And the police will be part of that, to look at how we all use a consistent message and consistent understanding of the early impact of mental health. But not speaking for the police, but from what I understand of the police, is a significant amount of their work is the result of mental health issues and incidences as well. So it's something that they constantly have on their radar.
Thanks, Ruth. Ross, do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, Convener, nothing to add to that.
Are you okay with that answer, Lynn?
Yeah, that's fine.
Right, now, I don't see anything else. Thank you very much for attending. I shall draw this meeting to a close. Thanks to the officers for all their preparation, and thank you, colleagues.